Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our digital version of the Contemporary Classics Book Club. This week, Malik and I are going to be talking about the Susan Wiggs book, The Oysterville Sewing Circle. Malik, thanks for joining me.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You know, same old, same old. It feels like
Oh
every day is
yeah,
the same as the one before. How about you? How you hanging in there?
I am hanging in there. I am definitely. I'm. It's funny. I'm just as busy as before.
I know. I feel the same way.
Yeah, just because I think because I'm conscious of trying to find things to do that I'm actually engaging in a lot of things
Oh,
that I
that's good.
like to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you been
So I'm
doing
I'm
doing a
definitely
lot of
busy.
reading overall?
Yes, I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of writing.
Okay.
A little less TV because I got tired of the TV thing really
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah. Yep.
And then just a lot to trying to
Yeah.
get things together, keep
Well, it's
things together.
still poetry month. You still writing poetry and all that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Always writing poetry.
Nice. Okay. Do you got anything
Yes.
out there that people could read? Is it online any place or anything like that?
I'm sorry. You mean
You like your own poetry. I know you put it in
oh
some.
my own
I
poetry?
know you put it in contests and things before. I didn't
Right.
know if there was any like online way to do that.
Oh no, I actually don't have anything online
Oh, okay.
that's accessible
All
right
right.
now.
Well,
But
one of these days. One of these
yes,
days.
yes. Pretty soon. That's what I'm working on.
All right. I was trying to think when the last time you and I did a book club together, and outside of the podcast, when we recently talked about A Long Way Down, I think it was maybe last Halloween when we did Needful Things.
I think
Is
it
that the right?
was Needful Things.
Yeah.
Is that the one we did when we went over to the coffee shop?
Yeah, we did that
Okay.
at there's a little antique store in Wellsville that's actually called Needful Things,
Right.
based on the book. So yeah, we had they opened up the doors for us and we had the book club down there. That was a
Right.
heck of a book. Do you remember that? That was
Yes. Oh man, that was a deep, thick book.
it was and dark and boy, that was
Yes.
about as different from the Oysterville Sewing Circle as you can get, I would say.
Yes. It just came to my mind. I think we did Artemis after that. It
Oh,
was like the sci-fi. It
yes,
was
you're right.
like sci-fi.
Oh, I
Yeah.
hated that book. Did you like that one?
That one wasn't. Yeah, it was kind of boring.
Yeah,
It was.
yeah.
It
Well,
was.
that's written by Andy Weir, who'd written The Martian, which I loved. I thought The Martian was great, but
Yeah,
Artemis
The
was.
Martian was good. I
Ooh.
said I actually seen the movie and read the book.
Yeah, Artemis was a rough sit though. So okay,
Yes, it
all
was.
right. So everybody gets to choose which book club they participate in. So why did you choose Oysterville Sewing Circle?
Um, this it was something different, something new.
Yep.
Plus it was poetry month,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't too many openings, so I had to pick
Yeah.
something.
Okay. All right. The truth comes out. Um, had you read any Susan Wiggs stuff before this?
I hadn't read through a whole Susan Wiggs book. I
Mm-hmm.
am familiar with her,
Yeah.
because I think she's been writing for like 30 years
Oh yeah.
now.
Yep.
So I have heard of a
Yeah.
lot of her work. I've seen some of her interviews and stuff like that, but I hadn't really got dove into any one of her books
Okay.
until this one.
A few years back, I read a book of hers called "The Goodbye Quilt," and it's about a mother and daughter who are doing like a cross country trip, taking the daughter to college, and the mom's trying to finish this goodbye quilt, which was like a family tradition, and that's kind of what moves the plot. They're trying to get settled into college and all that, and I really like that. I thought that was a particularly good book. So that sort of got me interested in her writing a little bit more. Since then, I've read one called Family Tree, and then I think Oysterville Sewing Circle is the most recent of hers that I read, and it's also her most recent published. She's
Right.
got she's got one coming out in June. I want to say June or July, sometime in the summer.
Yeah, July 2020. Yep.
July, okay, called Lost and Found Book Club.
Yes.
And she was telling me we just interviewed her for the podcast, the All the Book Show. So if you're watching this and you haven't heard that interview, you can find that at soundcloud.com/allthebooks or anywhere you get podcasts. Because I did a nice about 40 minutes interviewing Susan Wiggs, and we talked quite a bit about her writing process and all the steps it takes to go from an idea to getting down on the page. So that was a I loved that interview. It was really interesting.
Oh, okay.
And I found out in the course of that interview that she has some local roots, and I knew that. I knew she spent some time in Olean because her mom is from Olean and all that. But she actually took cello lessons in Wellsville. Isn't that crazy?
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And that's never come up before. And just as we were talking, she was like, "Oh yeah, Wellsville. Yeah, I took music lessons there," and it just
Yeah.
kind of blew my mind a little bit. What a weird connection that is.
Yeah.
But
Small world.
I know. So this book. this book, as we covered it in the interview I did with her a little bit, but this is really topical considering the Me Too movement and all that's been going on in the
Right.
news over the last couple of years. And she was saying to me that like all of that really broke once she was basically finished with the book. And so they had to sort of step back and see, like, do we need to make any changes to this? Do we need to adjust what we're doing here? And ultimately they didn't and put it out. But it's funny how that happens, that she happened to write a book that ended up being as topical as this one is.
Right.
But, well, I thought I would start with, just in case anybody's listening who's a fan of Susan Wiggs but hasn't read the new book, I thought I'd give an overview of what the book is. So this is I'm going to read the synopsis from HarperCollins. So here we go. At the break of dawn, Carolyn Shelby rolls into Oysterville, Washington, a tiny hamlet at the edge of the raging Pacific. She's come home. Home to a place she thought she'd left forever. Home of her heart and memories, but not her future. 10 years ago, Carolyn launched a career in the glamorous fashion world of Manhattan, but her success in New York imploded on a wave of scandal and tragedy, forcing her to flee to the only safe place she knows. And in the back seat of Caroline's car are two children who are orphaned in a single chilling moment, 5-year-old Addie and 6-year-old Flick. She's now their legal guardian, a role she's not sure she's ready for. But the Oysterville she left behind has changed. Her siblings have their own complicated lives, and her aging parents are hoping to pass on their thriving seafood restaurant to the next generation. And there's Will Jensen, a decorated Navy SEAL who's also returned home after being wounded overseas. Will and Carolyn were forever friends as children, with the promise of something more, until he fell in love with Sierra, Caroline's best friend and the most beautiful girl in town. With her modeling jobs drying up, Sierra too is on the cusp of reinventing herself. Carolyn returns to her favorite place, the sewing shop owned by Mrs. Lindy Brown, the woman who inspired her and taught her to sew. There she discovers that even in an idyllic beach town, there are women living with the deepest of secrets. Thus begins the Oysterville Sewing Circle, where women can join forces to support each other through the troubles they keep hidden. Yet just as Carolyn regains her creativity and fighting spirit, and the children begin to heal from their loss, an unexpected challenge tests her courage and her heart. This time, though, Carolyn is not going to run away. She's going to stand and fight for everything and everyone she loves. So, Malik, what were your general thoughts of the book? It seemed like you liked it overall.
Yeah, overall, I like the book. I like how it was put together. It was really a familiar story. I could relate to it in a lot of ways. Just as far as the journey of life and how things in life, a lot of times you have a plan, and things don't go according to plan.
Yes. Yeah.
And that really it kind of really tests your character, what kind of person you are, and I feel like that was a lot of what was going on in this book. She was, Caroline was faced with a lot of difficulties. She had a plan, and things wasn't going according to plan, so she had to, really learn how to, go with the flow and stay motivated and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And it was really motivational, how strong she was.
I agree.
With all the issues they was dealing with.
Yeah. Well, it starts with her in a pretty low place, because she's, as the synopsis says, she's starting this fashion career, and she's right on the cusp of something big, and her designs get stolen. So like she's dealing with that, and then at the same time, her good friend who has two children ODs at a pretty shocking turn, and suddenly she finds herself. Not only has she like lost her career, but suddenly she's the mother of two children, and so I think it totally makes sense for her to go back to her roots, don't you?
Oh yes. That was something I was really familiar with. I feel like a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
As far as leaving home and going on your own, and being young, you don't really know what's out there. So when a lot of these obstacles come, it's always a good feeling to know that last resort you can go home.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have that option. So that's that. I think that was basically the biggest part of the book was her having the courage and to go home and not feel like a failure.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think she's sort of struggling with, I, coming from a small town and then going out, she's going to make it big in New York City. Having to sort of come back with her tail between her legs, as they'd say,
Right.
would be hard. I think it would be hard not to have that feeling of failure, like you're saying. So, but I think that she just doesn't really see any other option. I think she knows
Right.
that. I know that she knows that she needs support and she needs her family, and she's got to figure out like the next step of her life. So yeah, I thought that really rang true as well. I mean, I agree with you there.
Yeah. I also like how it switched from the big city life story to the little country town story.
Yeah.
Being able to squeeze that into one novel was I think she did that pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I think you have some of that experience too, right? I mean, just the change from Buffalo to Wellsville probably feels a little bit like city to country.
Yes, we create our own reality, so that can be traumatizing.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so.
Yeah.
I felt like she has a lot of self-doubt throughout the whole thing, and because in part she is being taken advantage of, and that's a big part of the story. But also, she just is not somebody who was planning on having children, and now she has two traumatized children, which is harder, than just getting kids dumped on your lap to start is difficult. But then these are kids who are dealing with the very unexpected death of their mother. So it's, it's a lot to handle. What did you think of, as soon as the old love interest rolls into town, it's like you sort of know, oh, okay, all right, something's going to happen here. What did you think of Will?
I thought it was a little stereotypical.
Yeah.
Just because how how she described him.
Yeah.
And,
well,
his
for me, as
persona
soon
and
as you see like Navy SEAL, you're like, oh, love interest,
Right.
So this was actually a part of the book that I had a little trouble rooting for her here, because the plot is once we get into Oysterville, it's sort of split between the present, and then we see Will and Caroline and Sierra as teenagers, and the plot's sort of bouncing back and forth, and it's pretty clear that Will and Caroline were sort of meant to be, and that Sierra sort of comes in and disrupts all that. And I guess I should warn that in order to discuss this book, we're going to have to spoil this book. So if you haven't read the Oysterville Sewing Circle and you don't want spoilers, now is probably a good hop-off point for you, because I'm about to spoil it. But
I'll try my best not to.
I know, but I think from here on out, fair warning, everyone, we're going to spoil this book. Will and Caroline are basically on the road to becoming a couple, with each of them sort of being afraid to take the next move. And then Sierra comes in, and when Caroline doesn't make that move, Will sort of ends up with Sierra, basically. And so that's where we are in the future. Will and Sierra are married, and you get the impression right away that it's not a great relationship, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, you get that sense. A relationship still, but maybe a little animosity, kind of like a sibling rivalry kind of thing.
Yeah.
Going on between them.
And this was, I think, character-wise, where I had a little trouble being on Caroline's side, because, it's Will and Sierra are married and have been married for a long time, and right from the start, that Caroline has her sights on Will, and it was kind of hard to root for that relationship because it involved a marriage breaking up. Did you have trouble with that at all, or did it just seem?
I didn't have trouble with it.
Okay.
Obviously, you have your reservations about infidelity and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But more what I got from it was a character thing. Because it kind of feels like the character of Sierra was being questioned a little bit.
Yeah.
Just to say that maybe in hindsight, Caroline was a better fit for Will.
Well, I think there's no question that Caroline's a better fit for Will. It's just, I don't know. I guess I just had trouble rooting for their marriage to implode so that Sierra would get out of the way. I just thought it was sort of hard to. I think you were supposed to root for that right from the start, and I just sort of felt like, well, I don't know, maybe they should try to work it out. I mean, it's not like Caroline didn't have an opportunity, but Anyway, yeah, I mean, Sierra is painted pretty one-dimensional, don't you think? I mean, she's kind
Yeah.
of just like I feel like she's portrayed as sort of the vapid model who's not paying attention to her husband, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah, that's why I said it's more of a character.
Yeah.
I think that's where Susan Wiggs was really touching on
Yeah.
with that whole situation. Um,
Yeah.
because like you said, she's the prettiest girl in town,
Right.
and she's just more into
Yeah.
herself, kind of a little
Yeah.
kind of narcissistic in a
Well,
way, and
I think that the point of view of the book is that by Will and Caroline getting together, it's sort of righting a wrong that happened many years ago and them not getting together. So
right,
I think the point of view of the book is supposed to be these two were always supposed to be meant to be together. And so when given the opportunity later, it's what's supposed to happen. It's the right thing to happen. But I just thought, as Caroline being sort of presented as this like kind, noble character, for her to like, even with the history, for her to kind of go after her friend's husband, I just
right.
thought was kind of a weird character choice that I never was quite. I was never quite behind that.
Yeah,
Even
yeah,
though even though obviously they're supposed to be together.
yeah. See, that's one thing about Susan Wiggs. Like I said, I haven't read a lot of her books, but
Yeah.
I did go over some of the reviews and some of the history, and she really just dives
Yeah.
into a lot of issues.
Yeah.
She's kind of known for that. So
Yeah.
from the woman's point of view,
Mm-hmm. And what eventually comes out is the children's mother, who has died in the beginning, Angelique is her name. You sort of got the impression that she was being abused, that there was somebody kind of pulling the strings and pushing her to make choices, and that thread of domestic abuse and really just abuse of power is one that becomes pretty crucial throughout the book. And that's what the Oysterville Sewing Circle within the book, that's what that is really meant to be. That's sort of code for a support group for women dealing with that sort of problem.
right?
Did you see that coming in the beginning? Did you see that was the direction we were going to go?
Oh no, not at all.
No, I
Not at
didn't
all.
either. I didn't
Not at
either.
all.
I thought that was a genuine surprise. And I don't think that I think the synopsis that I'd read before reading it was a little bit more like, the women in the community draw strength from each other, and I thought it was
Right.
just more of a like a friendship bond sort of thing. But to get into it and see that there's this whole sort of dark undercurrent happening, I thought was pretty surprising considering. Well, I mean, you see the cover, and it's the hardcover is like a red thread with a needle in it, and the newer one is sort
Oh,
of a splashy, sunny, like Seattle Cove sort of thing, and I was expecting a very different kind of book. So I will say I was pleasantly surprised that it was tackling a more a darker topic than I originally had expected. Do you agree?
oh yeah, yeah. Just for me, it was the transition was really it was a good transition because it was really surprising for me.
Yeah,
Like that the saying, you can't judge a book by its cover.
yeah.
I just didn't see that
Right.
coming.
No, no,
And,
I didn't see it
and
either. And as it connects more and more with Angelique's background and the things that put Caroline in the place that she ends up, it just becomes more and more insidious, I think, just throughout the plot and the characters, that all of our main characters, I think, are sort of touched by this, like, this very prevalent idea of abuse of power and just
oh yeah,
abuse in general. So that even though like on the surface it doesn't seem like the primary motivation, it really is the thing that is pushing all of the characters in a specific direction.
oh I agree, 100%.
So that again was a surprise, and I think that's a credit to the book that it was able to pull off a surprise like that. Now, as far as the kids, it seems like Caroline does not immediately. I mean, okay, she does take responsibility in that she takes the kids in, but she really spends a lot of time trying to decide if that's permanent. What did you think of that?
I thought that was I feel like that gave it a little more realness to the character
That's true.
of Caroline, because that is one of the most noblest things
Mm-hmm.
that anyone can do.
Yeah.
So just to really tackle and dive into the mind process of, not feeling guilty, but feeling responsible, and wanting to step up to a responsibility that magnitude. um you would have to think about. That's not something that you just do on impulse.
Yeah.
That's something that you really have to think about, if you're even fit to pull that off.
Yeah.
Children are, that's the hardest job in the world. I always say mothers are the hardest working people on earth. So
Oh, and especially, I mean, to take it on all by herself when she doesn't have any sort of like
right.
experience doing that is a big deal. And yes, I agree with you. I think that you're exactly right, that her taking that time to think about it is a much more true response than you might expect. I think the stereotypical response, in a book that maybe wasn't as thoughtful as this one, would have been that she would just instantly be like, of course I'm taking the children,
Right.
but here Caroline is really like, is this right for me? Is it right for them? Should I actually be doing this or not? Like, she
Right.
really takes some time to weigh that decision. And I
A
think,
5 and a 6-year-old,
yeah,
mind you.
yes, I know. And I think that one of the things that pushes her along a little bit and pushes her more towards Will is her seeing, just how much he likes the kids and how much, they like him. That, I think, just sort of sweetens the pot all around, and maybe is another reason why she's a little bit more, I don't know, open to the idea of maybe Will and Sierra will get a divorce and she'll be able to, because it's not like she
Yeah.
actively tries to break them up, but I do think that she sort of puts herself out there. But,
Right. Right.
we find out a little bit more about Sierra. Sierra has kept some secrets from Will. Do you remember this? Sierra has terminated a pregnancy and not told Will.
Yes.
And that's something that would be a huge deal for Will to find out. And then here we have Caroline finding out.
Right.
So, I mean, what do you think about that? Like, I guess I feel like, well, the question is, do you think that Sierra was right to tell Caroline about that?
Um all is fair
Yeah.
when it comes to friendships,
Yeah.
and even if there is that kind of rivalry going on between them, there's still that connection of friendship. So she maybe trust her
Yeah.
in a certain kind of way.
Yeah.
But I think that still adds to what I was saying earlier, as far as them just creating a persona for Sierra, and more of a case for Caroline to kind of say, Sierra been dropping the ball all
Yeah.
this time,
Right.
so
Yeah.
she's just really not fit. So it's almost like Caroline and Will getting together
Yeah.
finally, would be a better thing,
Hmm.
than him staying with Sierra.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with
It
you.
just adds to that narrative.
It does.
You know.
It does. And I think that for Sierra, I mean, the kind of character that she's made to be in this book, it would make sense that she wouldn't really have a lot of friends or be open with people. I mean, she's kind of self-motivated and self-focused. So for her to, I understand why she would tell Caroline, because there's something about a childhood friend, even if you haven't seen them in a long time, when I'm with some of my childhood friends, it feels like no time has passed, even though
Right.
plenty of time has passed. So I do understand why Sierra would tell that to Caroline, but I also think, given Caroline's close and long-standing relationship with Will, Sierra put Caroline in a pretty awful position by telling her that secret that Sierra had not even told Will.
Right.
But I think that really does drive a wedge that you can't come back from. And I think ultimately when the marriage of Sierra and Will crumbles, and we have some time passing before Caroline and Will sort of act on their feelings, it does sort of put the blame squarely on Sierra, I think. Don't you?
Right. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's why I said, from the beginning, when we started talking about how you felt about Caroline, pursuing Will, even though he's married to Sierra and
Yeah.
everything like that. I just felt like it was all those little things in there that kind of point you in the direction of, Sierra doesn't deserve
Yeah.
Will and Caroline does.
I certainly think that's the way that you're meant to feel. I think that Will as a character, for me, was maybe a weakness of the book because I don't really think that he's given much development. I think he's just
Right.
supposed to be kind of just a heroic, nice, strong,
Right.
paternal Navy SEAL, and you're just supposed to like feel good about him. The only time that I think you get a negative view is when in a flashback scene where Carolyn is basically attacked at a party. Do you remember this? Carolyn's attacked at a party, and Will rescues her, but he also kind of blames her for acting in a provocative way. And so that's, I think, one place where you see a not so great side of Will, but I don't really think they developed that outside of that scene. Do you?
No, no, not really, not
Yeah.
really. I do remember vaguely
Yeah.
that scene, but
Yeah, and so in that moment, you see that Will like has his own issues, and that you know, blaming a woman for something that a man has done to her, I think, is plays in really well to the overarching plot with the within the fashion industry and the abuse of power and the the manipulation and the abuse that's happening there. I mean, you see that parallel, but I don't know that it ever really connects as nicely as I want it to. It's like both of those issues are there and at play, but they don't. I don't think that it ever really harkens back to that issue that Will had. Do you?
right. No, no. I kind of think it speaks to the relationship between Will and Caroline and maybe why they didn't pursue um
Yeah, yeah, that's
their
true.
marriage and their relationship a
Yeah,
little earlier in life,
yeah,
because it kind of just shows them as far as their thinking process kind of bumping heads, looking out for each other but still bumping heads on issues. And maybe that's why you know Caroline, her main motivation was not to be with Will but to go pursue her career. And
yeah,
all these little things help you make the decision, the ultimate decision. So
yeah,
yeah, and I think that's it's just a really good way to set up the plot.
yeah.
And
Well, when I was talking to the author about this, when we were interviewing her, we got to talking about this issue in particular, and I think her point of view on this was, and you can listen to that interview where she talks about it more in depth and better than I will be able to, but I think that part of her reason for including those kinds of things was to point out that like sexism is a problem, and it's not just like evil villainous characters who have an issue with sexism. It's a prevalent problem that like pervades like all aspects of society, and I
right,
think that showing that in Will, who's meant to be a true and noble character, I think that she's kind of pointing out that like, look, this is not something that people are immune from. This is discrimination and all that is not something that it's there everywhere. I mean,
right,
what do you
right.
think?
Oh yeah, 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 definitely. I actually watched the interview. um it was actually Rachel Kahn, which is her Susan Wiggs editor,
Okay.
and they did an interview together.
Okay.
And they spoke on that a lot, just as far as like how you were saying the Me Too movement
Yeah.
and how the floodgates just opened after she wrote the book, as far as these issues being talked about, as far as feminism and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, that's definitely a big issue.
Yeah. Well, I,
And,
I,
and
I guess I have to sort of applaud Susan Wiggs for including that in a novel like this because I feel like, I mean, not that this sits in any one specific genre, but I think if you were to sort of just, with a wide net, sort of grab fiction of a similar type, I don't know how often big issues like this are going to come into play.
right,
I think that, if you're getting ready to grab a feel good book and you look at the cover of this, you might assume that this is just a feel good book. And I think in a lot of ways it is. But I think that she saw the value in including some of this darker stuff just to remind people that like these kind of things are a problem.
right,
So I, I
right.
have to I have to give her props for including something like that in a novel like this because I think it's atypical of popular fiction to do that.
Yes, yes, I agree.
And let's see. I mean, as it all sort of comes to a head, I mean, we do get our big villain, back in the fashion industry, and we learn a little bit about, we see the connection between Caroline's designs getting taken and the person who was putting the pressure on and abusing Angelique, abusing the power that he had. I mean, we see all that sort of come to head and resolve in, I think, a pretty satisfying way. Don't you think the book ends on a pretty satisfying
Yeah.
note?
Oh yeah. Yes, definitely. Definitely. It's not I would say an unresolved ending or a sad ending. I think it's just it's something that makes you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
It's a feel good story.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I think as a whole it is, but it does manage to dip into some of these societal problems, I think, in a pretty effective way overall. Um, I guess I think if there were any criticisms to throw at it, it would be that I think it tries to do a lot of stuff. Like when you
Okay.
have, her and the children, you have the flashbacks, the relationship, the sort of the triangle between her and Sierra and Will. You have these, the domestic abuse issues. You have the fashion design theft and the abuse of power on a grander scale. With the sort of the villainous man and that taking advantage of the women whose future he kind of decides. There's so much of that, so much going on that I think occasionally it struggles a little bit to keep all of those like plates spinning. Did you find that at all?
It put everything together for me pretty good because
Okay.
my mindset reading this whole book, because before I actually read the book, I I watched some interviews just
Yeah.
to get more familiar with Susan Wiggs.
Yeah.
Um, and I did. I realized it. I tried to look at it from a woman's perspective when I was
Okay.
reading the book,
Hmm.
and feeling as if I was a woman and I was reading this book, I would not be able to put it down
Yeah.
because it's always transitioning to oh no, oh no, oh no, they didn't, or no, he didn't, or what's gonna happen. So I feel like for women dealing with all those important issues like that, it's something that they want to see what happens.
I
So it's definitely a page turner,
I
and
and
for
I,
men also, men
Yeah.
also.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's things here for everyone, but that's one of the reasons why I appreciated talking to her about this book so much because, I read it and I have feelings about it, but I just feel like, as a white man, I just don't really have anything to contribute to a discussion about, discrimination and all that. And so to hear her perspective, I think was a lot more enlightening for me. To get what she was aiming for and to get what her goals in writing this book and what she hopes the takeaway would be. I found that to be the most interesting and rewarding thing because I really feel like, listening to her talk about it, she has a wholly different perspective than I would. And
Right.
one of the things that she said was it's opened up a lot of conversations with people reaching out to her and saying, this book, I was struggling with some of the things in this book and the way you illuminated that, it made me feel less alone. And she did a lot of research into this to begin with and had a lot of like raw and serious conversation. So I think that as a writer, the impression I got from her was that writing this book was a lot more impactful than some of the other projects that she's worked on. And I think anything that does that, anything that can shine a light on some of these problems and reach people in a different way and let people know that they're not alone, I think that the value in that, I mean, I just don't think that you can really quantify that. And so I think that's a really important element to this book that you can't really have this book without discussing those issues, and I think that's important.
Yes, definitely.
So overall, I mean, I had a pretty good experience reading this book, and like I said, the other book by her that I might recommend would be The Goodbye Quilt because I thought that was pretty good. Did this encourage you to pick up any more of her books, Malik? You think you'll revisit this author in the future?
Oh yes, definitely. I'm pretty excited. I got a little teaser on the Lost and Found bookshop,
Mm-hmm.
which will be coming out in July
Okay. Yeah.
of this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty sure I'm gonna pick that up and check it out.
Okay. Great. Well, maybe we'll have to check back in and then see how you feel
Yeah.
about that one. All
Oh
right.
yeah.
Well, Malik, always nice to talk to you. Nice to
Oh,
nice to
always.
see you for a little bit here while we're stuck in our homes. But
Pleasure.
all right. Well, like I said, the book clubs are continuing even though the library's closed. We're doing a book club right now on Zadie Smith's On Beauty. We have a Star Wars book plan. We've never done a Star Wars book club before, but we're doing that in May. That's Star Wars: The Approaching Storm by Alan Dean Foster. So, On Beauty by Zadie Smith and The Approaching Storm by Alan Dean Foster are the book clubs that we'll be doing in the coming weeks. So, if you've read any of those books, feel free to send your comments to wellsville@stls.org, or of course anywhere on social media. David A. Howe on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Find us in all those places and let us know what you think of the book Malik and I just talked about and the books that are coming up. All right, I think that's going to do it for this version of the Contemporary Classics Book Club. Malik, thanks again.
No problem. Have a blessed evening.
You too. Hope to see you soon.